Hey guys, Matt Smith back with you here, talking more about the college football playoff expansion from 4 to 12 teams. My first video, I looked at more of a summary of what's it going to look like, the logistics, a potential calendar, what the matchups would have been in 2019. For this one, I want to give you more of my personal thoughts on the expansion, why I don't like it, why I prefer 4, and what I think will ultimately be some of the pitfalls in this move from 4 to 12 teams. So I'm going to start by acknowledging that there are some reasons why people like it and why they should like it. It is going to make more individual games important come November. I will have to admit that myself. You're going to get more fan bases probably interested throughout the season because their team has a shot. Not to win the national championship. That's not changing. We're going to have probably 5 teams capable of winning it in 2021. And given the landscape of recruiting, I don't see that changing dramatically over the next 3 to 5 years by the time the playoffs starts. One team will probably rise up. One team might fall because of a coaching change. But there's just not a lot of parity in this sport, and there's no big reason to think that this expansion is going to change that. We're getting one great Saturday in December. We don't know when it'll be, sometime between the 9th and the 20th, depending on the calendar and which week they go with. We're going to have either 4 games that Saturday or maybe 1 game Friday night and then 3 back to back to back on Saturday of first round games. Those are going to be fun, and you're going to get some unique matchups. You might get some southern teams trekking north to play in 25-degree weather that we just never see in college football. I know in 2019, we probably would have had Florida and Wisconsin as a first round game in December. Madison, it's always loud, it's always drunk, and in December it's going to be pretty darn cold there. So those matchups would be fun. And like I said, we don't see those very often, and that is definitely a plus that we don't have in the current system. I think it's a myth that's going to help recruiting. As I said, their team has a shot to make the playoff. Okay. I don't think players are going to go there just to get one shot at a playoff game when they know that school was just not capable of winning a national championship. Kentucky, I think, was right on the bubble for a 12-team spot back in 2018. That's the only time they've been that high in probably 40 years. No one's going to go to Kentucky just because now they have a very tiny chance of sneaking into a playoff. They're not competing for a national title. If they want to go to Kentucky, it's because it's the playing time. It's because they're from the state. It's for those reasons. This isn't going to expand recruiting to teams that really just can't win a national title. That's a myth, and we're going to see that play out. I don't buy into that for a second. But to recap, again, you're going to get more games that matter in November. I concede that. You're going to get one great Saturday in December. It's going to be a lot of fun with significant games with everybody playing and not sitting out. And your team might have a shot to compete for the national title, especially in the G5, where we know not all 130 teams going into this season will have that chance. In this system, if you go 13-0 and you win your conference, barring 3 G5 teams going 13-0, you're probably going to technically have a shot to win the national title. So that's how you spin it. That's the positives. That's what people like about it. Why I hate it? Every game matters in the current model of college football. You can lose, but if you lose, you gotta run the table. You gotta dominate the rest of the way, and you might need some help, which is the part I like about it. We go back to 2019 when LSU played Alabama in November. Alabama lost. They knew, all right, we still have a shot at this thing. We're going to have to win out. We're going to have to go down to Auburn and win the Iron Bowl. And then we're going to have to keep an eye on what goes on out in the Midwest with Oklahoma and what goes on in the West Coast with Oregon. That's fun. That brings fan bases involved across games across all the country. That's what would have happened. It became a moot point, obviously, when Auburn beat Alabama, knocked Alabama out. But had Alabama won that game, they're going into championship Saturday, idle, without a 13th game, rooting like heck potentially for Oregon had they not lost to Arizona State to lose, or to Utah, who actually was the one-loss team and a legitimate threat, and Oklahoma as well. And that would be fun to have those games where the South is focused on what's going on in Dallas, what's going on in Santa Clara. That's the cool thing about college football, and I think we kept that under the 14 playoff. So I get there might be more interest in the playoff in the West Coast because a team is actually participating in it. I like that you have fan bases in the Southeast paying attention to games on the West Coast because it does affect their team's chances of competing for a national title. So, and the games that are going to matter more going forward, you might have 6-2 Iowa at 6-2 Wisconsin, November 9th in Madison. Now that game is probably an elimination game for the playoffs. And that sounds good on paper, but by November 9th, if Iowa's 6-2 and ranked number 18, okay, they've lost to Iowa State. Maybe they went to Penn State in October and got popped. I know Iowa's not a national title contender. They've proven it over the 2 months of the season. Why should I put my vested interest in this game just because the loser is out of the playoffs and the winner might not be? I want to focus on LSU Alabama. I want those stakes to be super high like they were in 2011, like they were in 2019, and not just have a situation where the loser is going to end up getting a home game. If you're an Alabama restaurant owner in Tuscaloosa, well, heck, by losing that game in 2019, you get a playoff game in December in Tuscaloosa, while LSU does not. Sure, they get a bye and such, but it's good for business to get that extra game. That's ridiculous. There shouldn't be good things coming out of a loss. It should be painful. That's the beauty of college football. You don't just move on to the next day like you do in baseball. It should hurt. You got to regroup, of course, and like I said, you're not out completely, but losses hurt in college football, and that's the beauty of it. That's why we all love it, and that's why it's risen to become clearly the number 2 sport in the country. And I think the impact of games in August and September is also a great thing. You have to go back to 2019, the Oregon-Auburn game. Oregon had a big lead in their neutral site opener against Auburn, fell apart at the end, and they took a loss in week 1. So they went back to Eugene knowing, all right, we can still get back in this thing, but we're going to have to run the table in the Pac-12. We can do it. We're probably the most talented team in the league other than maybe USC, but it's going to be hard to run a 9-game conference schedule. They won the first 7, were back in the top 10 contending, and they had a bad night in Tempe, lost to Arizona State, and that was it. So that game still mattered. Now, had Oregon not played that game and still gone 12-1 with just the Arizona State loss, maybe they don't get in over Oklahoma because their schedule was too weak for that number 14. But if they had beaten Auburn and held on, they have a great non-conference win over a ranked SEC team, better than anything Oklahoma has. That win would have vaulted them into the number 4 slot and a playoff game against LSU. So they took a risk by playing it. But again, if they hadn't played that game and just played a cupcake, I don't think they get in either. So the risk of playing that game, had they won, it would have paid off. They lost, but that game still resonated because they lost. Again, had they won, they're probably in the playoff. So August 31st, that game still mattered in early December. You cannot say that about any other sport other than college football. And again, those days are most likely over, going to 12 teams. The games of the century. Your Catholics versus convicts. You're going back to the 71 Nebraska-Oklahoma game. 2006 for the younger crowd when Michigan played Ohio State. I know Nebraska and Oklahoma had another game in 2000 that was 1-2. Huge game. Those games just aren't going to be the same anymore. They'll be fun. They're rivalry games. You want to beat the other guy. You want to beat big brother or little brother, but they just don't have the stakes because the loser, again, like the Alabama example in 2019, they just don't get a bye, and now they get a home game. Well, where's the pain? That's the beauty of college football, is the devastation that comes with a loss. I don't mean to be, negative about that, but that's part of it, is seeing a team not just slapping 5 with the other team and moving on. You like seeing them with the towels hanging over their head, knowing, boy, our national championship hopes might be out the door because we lost today. That's the beauty of the sport. You don't get that in any other sport. College basketball. Name one regular season memory you have from college basketball. There isn't any. It's probably the North Carolina Duke game from 1995 with Jeff Capel's half-court shot that sent the game to overtime or double overtime. That Duke team was atrocious. You just remember it because of the ending and because it was Duke Carolina. Coach K wasn't even the coach. He was having back surgery and sat out that season. All your memories are from 3 weeks in March. It's fun, but what about the other 4 months? They're meaningless. I don't want to see that happen to college football, where those huge games of the century with a ton of talent have no impact because the loser is still obviously going to the playoff because they're 9-1, and obviously they're going to get in that large bid. It's ridiculous. So I think we're going to see the consequence of that. It will be felt. A lot of people don't recognize it, but I know I'm in the minority there. So why do I like 4? I don't think anyone has actually gotten screwed out of a chance to play for the national title with 4. We saw it a couple times with 2. 2004 Auburn probably deserved a shot. 2003 was our last split title with USC and LSU, where we had 3 undefeated teams. But since we went to 4, I always point to 2014 TCU as the one team that I think got screwed. That's probably more because of what the committee did to them. They ranked them number 3 going into championship Saturday. Now, they weren't in a conference championship game, so their opponent wasn't great in Iowa State, but they played that day. They won 55-3, I think, and they fell from 3-6 because at that point they decided to elevate conference champions ahead of TCU, who was only a split champion. That frustrated me what they did to TCU. But other than that, the number 5 teams, they had a terrible loss or they had multiple losses, so I don't see why they need to get rewarded with a chance to play for a national title. We had Stanford in 2015. If you remember, they played Northwestern in an opener, I think scored 6 points, Lost that game. Okay, if you run the table and win the Pac-12, beat Notre Dame, you deserve it. But they lost a home game to an okay Oregon team, maybe a top 20 Oregon team. There's your two losses. They were number 5. Go to the Rose Bowl. That's a good season. You don't need to compete for a national title. The next 3 years, the number 5 teams were all Big Ten champions and all had losses by at least 29 points. You had 2-loss Penn State in 2016, which got popped at Michigan 49-10. Also lost to Pitt and then rallied and won the Big Ten. Great. Again, go to the Rose Bowl. You had a great season. You lost a game by 39 points. You've proven you're not the best team in the country. 2017, Ohio State. Took an early loss to Oklahoma. That was a fun game. Baker Mayfield going into the horseshoe and planting the flag. That was fun. They go to Iowa in November. 7-5 Iowa team, average. Lose 55-24. They finished number 5. Why do they need to compete for a national title? They've proven they don't deserve it. And the next year, you had Ohio State again. Now, they only had 1 loss, but they went to Purdue, who finished 6-6. They lost 49-20 to Purdue. You can have a bad day, but don't have a terrible day like that. Why do they need to compete for a national title? I know they got hot at the end of the season, but play better. The top 4 teams either won all their games or lost a close game to a good team, like Oklahoma did on the last second to Texas. There's your 4 teams that, showed up all year. They deserve to compete for the national title, not these teams that lay a massive egg. That's why these games matter. So again, other than 2014 TCU and the 7 years of the playoff, I don't think a team truly got screwed. Last year, I don't really talk about 2020 in terms of an example of anything, but again, number 5 Texas A&M lost by 28 to Alabama. I know Alabama was a great team. Play better if you want to compete for a national title. You've proven that. In terms of the 12-team model specifically, I guess, in terms of what I don't like, assuming we have 12 teams, how would I tweak it and still keep it at 12? Too many neutral site games. I hate that the top 4 teams don't get a home game. That's ridiculous. We know what the value, both directly and indirectly, is for the town, for the community of an extra home game. And why do only teams 5 through 8 get that? I know the bye is nice. It probably helps your chances of winning the national title. But you should get rewarded financially, again, for having a great season. So that really disappointed me. The Bulls just still have way too much power over this sport. As I said in the first video, we saw that with the playoff while we're playing games on New Year's Eve on a Thursday afternoon just because we're afraid to tell the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl to back off. It's ridiculous. And that's why we're having 3 rounds of neutral site games. I know a lot of different fans will only go to 1 game, so we're not asking a ton of people outside of families to travel 3 times to neutral site games. But for families, even with the financial assistance that the CFP provides, they're taking time off work. They might have other kids. They're missing stuff. It's not ideal for them. It's just too much when they can go right down the road for a home game for one of those. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry. So it was a frustrating day. As I said in the other video, again, I felt like I got knocked out in the 4th round in a fight that I thought was going to go 12 rounds and be a split decision that I would lose. I knew I'd lose. We knew we were going past 4 at some point. I thought it'd be 2026, and I thought it'd be 8. Instead, it's 2023, and it's 12. And that hurts. I'm disappointed. But here we are. I'm going to enjoy the next two years with 4. I'm not going to boycott the sport or anything ridiculous like that. It's still my favorite sport. But I think the people who are really excited about this are going to see the pitfalls coming down the road, and they'll look back and say, yeah, maybe 4 wasn't so bad. My ideal model would be go back to the old bowl tie-ins back in the 90s and then pick 2 teams after the bowls. If number 2 Ohio State plays number 8 USC in the Rose Bowl, all right, maybe USC doesn't have a great shot of being one of the top 2 by the end of the year. But I'll be damned if they don't want to knock the Buckeyes out of it. That'd be great. Make the Rose Bowl what it was, Big Ten versus Pac-10, that's great. SEC champion, go to New Orleans. Maybe they'll play number 3, maybe they'll play number 5, however you want to do it. Just make that New Year's Day fun again. And they said they were going to try and reclaim New Year's Day. Well, we heard that before with the playoff, and then 4 out of every 6 years, you're not even playing the meaningful games on New Year's Day. So what? So maybe this will do that. But again, I would love to see all that matter, have fan bases focused on games throughout the country, and 2 teams are left. If there's an unusual champion like Georgia Tech in 1990 or BYU in 1984 that just kind of all the pieces fell into place, they didn't have to navigate a 4-game bracket to win it, that's great. The beauty of college football is the imperfection is the perfection. It's different. It matters from day 1 throughout the whole season. It's not just a 3-week run like college basketball, which is awesome, or a 8 to 10 week run like the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are awesome, but they play 6 months before that and nobody cares. This is a sport that everyone is dialed in on Labor Day weekend because 1 loss could really knock your team out. So again, I'm disappointed. I'll get through it. I know I have some people on my side, but for the majority of you, congratulations. I know you've been wanting this for a long time.